Awesome. Well, hello. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Bethany, and I am the financial aid specialist here at Going Merry. So basically, what that means is I talk about financial aid with families basically all day long. Today, we're going to cover the topics relevant to financial aid, specifically in like the second semester of senior year of high school. What do you do if you have a financial gap? What scholarships should you be focusing on? How do you compare those offer letters and all of those things that are coming up in this season of life? If you don't know much about Going Merry, by the way, we are a completely free financial aid access platform. We help with a lot of these topics, so scholarships, financial aid appeals, financial aid education, all those types of things. For the most part, I'm going to take off my Going Merry hat tonight, but occasionally I'm going to kind of talk about a specific thing that we help with that can make one of the processes easier. But the first place to start, just so that we are kind of level set, is the financial aid basics, just to make sure everybody understands the different terminology that we're talking about. So I always like to define first what is financial aid. And the reason why is because financial aid is oftentimes synonymous with the federal Pell Grant, but that is not the case. The other mistake or misunderstanding that I oftentimes see is that people think aid equals money that you get for having a financial need, which is also not the case. So, financial aid is basically any money that helps you pay for college, and that can be in the form of grants, scholarships, work study programs, benefits from military families. It can also be in the form of student loans, both federal and private student loans. This term is a much broader term than most people realize. And the federal government, state government, and your colleges are going to use this broader term to define financial aid. Additionally, when I talk about financial aid, I like to break it down into two core categories. One of those is gift aid, or money you'll never have to repay. And the other category is that financial aid you will have to repay, or student loans. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is just how many places you can get financial aid from. The federal government, state government, nonprofits, your college, private companies and organizations, community-based organizations. It can come from a lot of places. And so it's really important that you really maximize the amount of opportunities that you can apply for and which ones you do apply for. The other thing I like to explain is what is going on with financial aid in terms of the right order of operations. Now, most students right now are going to probably be at the stage of number four, where they're trying to figure out what college they're going to attend. My guess is your students have already received their acceptance letters, at least at some of the schools. And if they have, the big mistake we don't want them to make is to jump to the conclusion of where they're going to attend before they get financial aid offer letters. What happens oftentimes with students, and this kind of starts all the way back in junior year when they start going on college tours and falling in love with campuses and deciding where they really want to go if everything works out. And they kind of get set on going to this school no matter how the money works out. And so I always like to tell students to take a step back, first figure out what those financial aid offers look like, compare them, and then choose the college that's going to be the best financial future for you and your circumstances. The other thing we sometimes see is parents kind of waiting until step number six, which is student loans, before they get really involved. And what can happen here is that students can miss their FAFSA priority deadlines or their TASFA priority deadlines. They maybe have missed out on scholarship applications because they didn't think they needed to apply to those until late into senior year. Or they've not had those conversations with their student about, hey, let's wait to commit to where we're going to go to school until we get to compare those financial aid offer letters. And the reason why this is so important and why I like to kind of lay this down as a foundation is because if you don't follow these steps in this order, we tend to find families take on more student loans than is necessary. So it's really important to make sure that you take a step back, you follow this order of operations, and everything we're talking about here today is really what we do from step number three on, because we should have already gotten our FAFSA or our TASFA applied for if we haven't done that yet. And really a lot of scholarships we should have applied to already as well. With that being said, there's still quite a bit we can do with scholarships. In fact, right now is actually peak scholarship season. It's the time in the year when we see more scholarships open up than the normal time. So we have a lot more scholarships coming available to students, and that means we should probably talk about scholarship strategies. What should we be focusing our time on? Because there are thousands and thousands of opportunities. And just to be realistic, your students don't have unlimited time. So my scholarship strategy for high school seniors is you should apply for one scholarship once a week. That sounds like a lot, and I know. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but that should be your benchmark goal. One scholarship once a week throughout senior year. I would especially say right now that is an important benchmark to set for your student. The other things that we see is making sure that students understand financial aid and where it comes from, and that scholarships are only really one piece of this puzzle. Pell Grants, institutional grants and opportunities, tuition discounts, student loans, work study programs, those are all different types of financial aid that a student can receive to make up their financial aid offer package from their university. And so, yes, scholarships are important, but they're oftentimes not a singular full ride scholarship that the student's getting. In fact, full ride scholarships make up less than 0.2% of all opportunities that are out there. So we really want students to focus on the right things, that they open up all of those opportunities to themselves by filing the FAFSA or the CSS profile if they need to do that as well, and that they focus on applying to as many opportunities as they can and focusing on the right opportunities so that they maximize their eligibility for scholarships too. The other thing I would really stress to your students is to make sure that you've got an affordable college list going on. Now, you won't really know this fully until you receive those financial aid offer packages, but once you get those, really sit down and compare them. And we'll talk about how we do that in a little bit because a smaller gap is a lot easier to close with a couple of scholarships than a really big gap. And again, that kind of just goes back to the reality of how many scholarships are worth large sums of money and how many of them are worth $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. The other thing I would really stress to your students is to choose better odds. So, thinking strategically about the scholarships fewer students are eligible to apply for or who can apply for those. The other thing is applying to as many as possible. So, that's why I set that benchmark of one scholarship once a week for a senior. I always in high school set aside 1 hour on a Saturday and apply to a scholarship. That's a really good habit just because deadlines open and close all the time, and it's going to make sure you have a vast amount of opportunities that you have submitted yourself to be eligible for. Now, how do we apply all of those strategies? The first thing is going to be local scholarships. And the great thing is that Fort Worth does a really great job of highlighting those opportunities for you guys. I'll share with you in just a little bit where you can go and find more local scholarships. We also feature local scholarships on Going Merry, so you might find some additionally on there. We actually highlight them and tag them so that they're easy to find as well. But these are the scholarships that statistically students have the absolute best chance of winning. And because of that, they should be the top priority for what you're applying to. These are scholarships only offered by your school district to students in your school district or from your school to students in your school, community-based organizations that are awarding them to students in your community. They're restricted typically based on school attendance or geographical area like a county or a zip code. And these opportunities have very few students who can apply for them. And also, they're typically not as apparent to students as something like a Coca-Cola scholarship that everyone's heard of. So they tend to kind of fly under the radar and go under applied to, making them much, much less competitive. The other one is going to be institutional scholarships, and these are going to be offered directly from the college or university the student is interested in. Now, my tip here is to not just simply to look on the big site for the scholarships. So don't just go to the University of Alabama scholarships in Google. Instead, what I would do is look up something like Culverhouse School of Business scholarships for freshmen. This is going to take you to the departmental page for the major that the student is interested in. So if I wanted to be a marketing major and go to UA, that's what I would look up. From there, that's going to help you narrow down to opportunities that fewer students are aware of, that fewer students are eligible for, because not everyone on campus is going to be a marketing major or a business major. It's also the best place to find upperclassmen scholarships as well as scholarships for like master's programs and PhD programs as well. So that's typically where you're going to find those opportunities, as well as internships, by the way. It's another good place to look for those. The next two categories are small awards and essay scholarships. And to be honest with you, these scholarships are just the ones students find to be the least appealing. Essay scholarships because they're time consuming, and small awards because they feel like a $500 scholarship, a $1,000 scholarship just isn't worth their time. But they are wrong. With small scholarships, this is going to be the vast majority of opportunities out there. But because fewer students are willing to apply for them, they're also typically less competitive and they can be a little bit easier to win. With essay scholarships, to kind of get around the fact that they are time consuming, I will tell you that 90% of scholarship essays out there, or essays for scholarships, are going to be based off of one of 10 prompts. So we actually have that list and I can share it with Ms. Asbury. so she can share that out. But what I always recommend is grab two or three prompts from that list, write a couple of essays, and tweak them a little bit if you need to. But like 9 out of 10 scholarships that have an essay are going to choose from one of those prompts. So it's going to really help you save some time if you use those essays as your baseline. There's, of course, always a zombie apocalypse one-off scholarship essay that you might have to write. That's a good way to save some time. And the last one is start early and keep going. Really common mistake I see with students is they wait until senior year to apply. Then they realize they're kind of behind the ball and they get really stressed out, but then they don't keep applying to scholarships in the summer or the fall of their freshman year. And there's a lot of opportunities out there. And again, fewer students are looking, and so they might have a better chance of receiving those. So I really want to encourage you, especially if you end up with a financial gap, which we'll talk about in a minute. I really want you to keep looking for scholarships once your student gets into college too. Now, Going Merry, of course, we started out as a scholarship site, so we do things a little differently. We match students to scholarships. We also vet every scholarship to help save some time. We do bundling and other things to help make things a little bit more efficient for you. And we also highlight those local scholarships to make them easier to find alongside those national scholarships that you might be more aware of. That said, we are not the only scholarship site out there. I was talking with Miss Asbury earlier today about some additional sites too. Scholarships.com, Scholarships 360, Niche is a good opportunity place to look as well. College Board. There's lots of scholarship sites out there. Now, the one caveat I will say here is most scholarship sites do not vet their scholarships. And what I mean by that is they are just posting them, or they allow someone to tell them they have a scholarship and they just post it without actually confirming it's a legitimate opportunity. And the reason why that's important to call out is one, because we do that. And so you don't have to question if a scholarship is real. If you do see it on Going Merry, it's been vetted by our team. But also, if you are going to another site, you need to take a little bit of extra time. Never do a pay to play scholarship, which means to submit the application, you have to pay a fee. That's a pretty good sign that a scholarship is a scam. If it's asking you for information that you're uncomfortable with giving, like a social security number, don't. Also, be aware that some companies actually use scholarships for marketing, and so they're going to be trying to data mine your information. So be aware of that too. Be careful is kind of my message there. But you should be looking on all these sites, trying to make sure you don't have an opportunity to kind of slip through the cracks because a scholarship provider only puts it in one place, because that does happen. And I mentioned earlier, but Fort Worth does highlight some local scholarships. So I've actually linked to it here, but they have a sheet that they keep updated once a month. And I believe it's also sent out to you guys. But I just wanted to show you that these are highlighted as opportunities. And the way the local scholarships will be highlighted is that the scholarship name will be that bright blue rather than a white box. So just be aware of that. I would prioritize these opportunities. I think there was 3 or 4 that I saw on there earlier with deadlines that are upcoming. So go ahead and focus on those. If you do nothing else, go apply to those scholarships tonight. Okay, now that we're leaving scholarships, what do we do if we've already got accepted? We're probably sitting around waiting for financial aid offers, is what I would guess. But once you're accepted, what we're going to do next is first take a step back. I really want to stress that the most important thing here is to make sure you make the right decision for your family and you make the right decision for the student's financial future. That's going to be priority one. So always take a step back and evaluate what's going to be the best decision for us. The other thing to think about is that you're probably going to need to start thinking about paying deposits, especially for going and finding roommates or registering for classes. Um, I would really recommend that you take a step back and consider your options. Think about how you can minimize costs, especially if you're worrying about a financial gap. Consider your student working part-time. Is that something that they're comfortable with? Will they be able to manage their time effectively? Also, ask about tuition installment plans. If you know you're not going to be able to pay that full tuition balance at like August, go ahead and ask the financial aid office what are their tuition payment plans, because some colleges will allow you to pay monthly through that semester to kind of help with the cost. I would also really, really recommend you reach out to the financial aid office at your top choice school for your student. The reality is that students who are connected with their financial aid office are far more likely to receive financial aid from that office. And it's really simply just because the school is aware of you. They're aware that you need additional financial aid. They're aware of your circumstances and why you might need it. So them being aware of you means that if more aid becomes available, maybe a student drops out and their scholarship funds come back into the pool, they can let you know and offer those opportunities to you. I also recommend that if you realize you've got a financial gap, you think about a financial aid appeal, which we'll talk about. And the last course of action is financing it. Student loans are always the last step. And I really want to stress that because that is a common mistake we see where families will skip over the financial aid appeal. They didn't do their FAFSA. They start doing all these other things before they actually, by looking at student loans, they kind of skip over those steps. And so it's really important that you understand student loans are the last step in this process. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is financial aid offer letters. These are going to be coming in. Typically, we see them start coming in December for early decision, early action schools. For schools that are regular decision, you typically start seeing them in February through April. I would say February and March are kind of peak offer letter season. And I know this is really small text, but I just want to say that we've got an example letter here as well, so you can go back and look at this a little bit more closely. But the letters are different depending on the college, and there's different sections that you need to be aware of. It's really important to understand if the college is breaking out their costs and they are including indirect costs as well as direct costs. Some are going to make it really apparent. They're going to call out things like this is for books and fees, and this is for room and board, and these are for estimated costs that most of our students incur, and all those things. That can be really helpful. Others are just kind of going to give you a box where it's like direct, indirect, and then total, which can make it a little bit harder. But do be aware of that. Make sure you're considering that. I would also look on your financial aid offer letter. It should list your student aid index somewhere on there. That's going to come from your FAFSA. And I want to stress really quickly, if you're not sure what a student aid index is, it's not an obligation to pay any specific amount. It's also not an out-of-pocket estimate. It's just simply a number that the college uses to determine your eligibility for their financial aid. It allows them to objectively evaluate you against other students they have coming to their school. So it's not an out-of-pocket estimate. So what you might see is that the cost of attendance minus your financial aid offer still leaves you with a gap even from your student aid index. And so this example letter kind of shows you what that might look like. I would also take a look at the gift aid versus self-help aid versus student loans. So gift aid is going to be grants, scholarships, tuition discounts, those types of things. Work study is going to be considered a self-help aid. And then student loans are going to be in the form of federal direct subsidized, federal direct unsubsidized, or federal parent plus loans. So just be aware of that and really consider it and understand what your different components are. Unfortunately, I see a lot of students start at the beginning number, look at the ending number, and they just assume that it's all going to be gift aid, and it's oftentimes not. So just be aware of that. Also be aware of how work study works. So with work study, you are not getting those funds up front. You're paying them out of pocket, and then your student is working throughout the semester to earn those funds back. If they don't go and get that work study job, those funds actually won't come back to them. So just be aware of that. And also pay attention to which loans your family is offered. With federal loans, there's three different types: subsidized, unsubsidized, and Parent Plus. We're going to talk about those more in just a minute, but just pay attention to that as well because unfortunately, I see a lot of parents just kind of assume that they're all going to be in the name of the student, and then they start signing on to them and they realize, oh, it's actually all a Parent Plus loan. So really slow down and double check the data and the information you're given. Okay. Now, I'm going to take a second and play this video. We have a tool on Going Merry called College Cost Insights. It actually walks you through each individual component of the letter. It also walks you through how to standardize your financial aid offer letters because they're not standardized in any way, and then compare them side by side. Now, this is the step in financial aid offer letters that most families skip. They get their offer letter from their student's top choice school and they just kind of stop, which is not ideal. You actually want to compare the offers and also compare the future outcomes for students from that school. So I'm going to play a video really quickly, show you what that looks like, and then I'll talk a little bit more about how you can do this on pen and paper and the things you'll want to consider.
What we're going to focus on is how they make sure that they choose the right college too by comparing the different financial aid offers they get. So I'm going to click onto this to show you how that works. Now, look, the first thing, as I said, is that it's really complicated for students to understand all of the different terms used in financial aid award letters. And sometimes it feels a little bit like the colleges do that on purpose. You'll see on this first page of our tool is we sympathize with students. We acknowledge that it's difficult for them to understand it and reference this kind of incredible study that was done 4 years ago that found that there were 136 different terms used to describe the same type of federal loan. it becomes impossible for students to truly understand it. So we give them that bit of context to help get them started, make sure they feel heard and supported. And then what we do is ask them to fill out the information from their award letters. And we've used these two universities. We have no links or anything to the universities, but I want to show you a live example. So what the student will do with their first college is input all of the costs that they have in the award letter, the grants and scholarships that they've been awarded in it. They'll input to their work study. And then finally, of course, the different loans that they've been offered to. Once they've done that for each of the colleges they're considering, we'll come through and actually ask them what their family contribution is going to be. And in particular, what the real family contribution. There's always a lot of frustration about the expected family contribution being way off. So we just ask, what can your family afford to contribute? And based on that, we'll crunch the numbers and come up with 3 recommendations for your students. The first is about how they maximize their long-term wealth. You can see it up at the top here. The second is then about how they minimize their student loan debt. And the third is about how they minimize their costs. Now, we recommend this top one, but we know other families have different priorities. So we want to give students these 3 different recommendations. Scrolling down, we make it really easy to understand how they're different and help families choose which one is most relevant to them. There's a quick, easy 2-minute video that is perfect for the attention span of your students to explain how everything works. But most importantly, if you keep scrolling, is this standardized financial aid award letter for each college. So it takes all these complicated terms and just spits out really standard, clear answers for students, like showing them their net cost and how that differs between each college, and then also the financial gap that they have for each college. And so suddenly, from all these complicated different letters, you have a really clear idea of exactly what each college is going to mean in terms of your costs. Scrolling down, we also want to give students a sense of what their future looks like. If they decide to go to that college, what will that mean for them in terms of their future salary, for example? And so again, for each college, we show them their expected future salary and their expected future loan payments. And a really important thing here is we show them what percentage of their future salary is likely to be spent on loans. What you can see is that Bowdoin, despite the fact we saw earlier that it was this higher financial gap and higher net cost, because it has that higher monthly salary, ends up being a lower percentage of future salary that's getting spent on loans. You can also see that by looking at the student's long-term future. So we show over time, and again, this is using data that comes from the US Department of Education. We show them what their total earnings will be over the next 20 years after their graduation, as well as how much will be spent on loans and interest, and give them a really clear way of understanding which will help them maximize their total earnings after loans. Again, we talk about other concepts for them, like acceptable levels of student debt, but like with everything we do on Going Merry, we really make it really clear and easy for the student to understand so that they make the right decision when it comes to paying for college. I'll wrap up there. Thanks so much for watching, and we're looking forward to helping your students maximize their financial aid and then make the right decision when it comes to which college to. Thanks.
So I hope that makes sense and it helps you understand the different components of an offer letter that you should be looking at and considering. I hope it also helps you understand what you should be looking at in terms of future outcomes. That's definitely something I know a lot of families really struggle with. So if you're trying to do that and you don't want to use College Cost Insights and you'd rather just use like a Google like Excel sheet or Google Sheets, what I would do is pull up the U.S. Department of Education's college scorecard. That's going to give you the outcomes for average graduates from that school. You can also look up the Department of Labor statistics. That can give you information on the average income based on degree path that your student wants to go in. And then you can look at average student loan terms. Usually a range is going to be typically 10 to 15 years for a repayment plan, a standard repayment plan, goodness. And then you can look up average interest rates based off of your credit score, and it can give you a pretty good ballpark of how much interest might accumulate and what your monthly payment would be. The one call out I will say is that if you're looking at this and you're like, oh my goodness, my student really wants to go to this school and they're gonna have to take out all these loans, The conversation I would have with them is about debt to income ratios. If you're looking at their future outcomes and you're realizing that their debt to income ratio upon graduation, once they have all those student loans, is over 10%, that's generally a sign that they're borrowing too much and it's going to be difficult for that loan to be manageable and to be repaid upon graduation. So that's a conversation to have with them. That's also just a really good concept for them to be aware of in general, because debt to income ratio is going to come into play when we're thinking about housing costs. You don't want your housing costs to be more than 30 to 35% of your total income. So there's things like that that you can kind of build up for them in terms of financial literacy as well by talking about those subjects. Also, before I go any further, I do just want to call out there is a attendance form. I'll drop it in the chat really quickly just in case anyone hopped on late and didn't see that earlier. Make sure you do that so that you can get counted as attending to this meeting tonight. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is the financial gap. So let's say you go through that. I also see that I have EFC on here instead of student aid index, which tells me I need to update this slide later. EFC is the old term, SAI is the new term. But what I will say here is if you do your financial aid offer comparisons and you realize you're going to have a financial gap and your student still really wants to go to that school, we really need to understand what this means. So a financial gap is going to be the difference between cost of attendance and the amount of aid you receive. It is not going to be anything different from that. And you'll be just looking at um, basically what your out-of-pocket expense is going to be to go to that school after everything. Scholarships, student loans, work study, grants, scholarships, everything. Financial need is a different calculation. This is the calculation that is typically used by colleges for determining if you will receive need-based aid. So the Pell Grant is going to be an income-restricted type of need-based aid, but most aid is instead going to use this calculation, which is cost of attendance minus student aid index. That's going to give you your financial need. And generally, if a college promises to meet 100% of financial need, which most don't, by the way, what they'll do is they'll cover that entire gap. So if you are looking at a meets needs university, meaning they promise to cover 100% of financial need, they will take your cost of attendance of $100,000, subtract your student aid index of 50,000, and get you to a financial need of 50,000 and offer you aid of $50,000. But like I said, most colleges aren't meets needs. Additionally, colleges may exceed that financial need calculation by offering you additional merit scholarships and other things as well. So depending on your school, their endowment funds, your student aid index, you may find that you have your entire need met. You may find that you have your entire cost met. You're not going to know until you receive those financial aid offers. So let's say you've got that gap at that school. First step is going to be talking to the financial aid office. Second step is going to be probably doing a financial aid appeal. So a financial aid appeal is basically where you come back to the school and you say, hey, I need more money to go to this school. You didn't give me enough. Can you reconsider? Now, the caveat here is that you typically are not eligible to submit a financial aid appeal if you didn't do your FAFSA and or CSS profile, depending on the school and if they require that as well. The reason why is because if they can't understand your financial circumstances objectively, they can't offer you aid that's need-based. So it's going to be really important. Also, filing the FAFSA, this is another reason why it's so important, because if your financial circumstances change in the middle of the year, having this access to a financial aid appeal can be really life-changing and make sure your student doesn't have their education derailed as well. Really common reasons we see for a financial aid appeal are students who get waitlisted and then they find out that they're admitted, but they're not given enough, and it's kind of a last minute decision. We also see students get a better offer from another school. Maybe their second choice school or a more prestigious school gave them additional aid. Sometimes they can use that for leverage. We also oftentimes see that the FAFSA didn't capture some nuanced situation or that financial circumstances have changed, whether that means a divorce or separation, someone has lost their job, income has been reduced in the last year, those types of things the FAFSA isn't going to capture, so they're able to consider in a financial aid appeal. The other one that I don't list here, and it's more common now because of the change from the EFC to this SAI, that formula change made it so that the FAFSA no longer considers multiple children in college at the same time. The EFC used to. So it's not automatically baked into that student aid index, but colleges can consider it upon a financial aid appeal. So if you do have multiple children in college, you've got twins in college, you've got an older sibling for your student in college, go ahead and submit an appeal because some colleges will go ahead and lower that student aid index for your student and offer you more aid on those grounds too. Now, if you do have multiple reasons for an appeal, I really recommend that you don't just throw spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Limit it to two or three. You really want this letter to be short, concise, and exact. Also, be prepared with documentation. You need to make sure you tell the truth and that you're able to back it up. Get specific with numbers. If you're saying my parent was laid off and their income changed, that's not going to be as compelling as my parent was laid off in January 17th, 2024. They were unable to find a job until March 15th, 2024. This meant that their income was reduced by this much money, and those were the impacts, and we had to do X, Y, and Z. Those are going to be much more compelling letters and much easier for the college to take and make a professional judgment in your favor to lower your student aid index. Also, call the office before you ever do an appeal. Ask them, who do I address this letter to? What forms do I need to do in advance? What's your preferred process? Every college does it differently. I would also ask them what their priority filing deadline is. General best practice for a financial aid appeal is to get that appeal submitted no later than mid-April. And this is because you typically see better acceptance rates of an appeal before May 1st, because at that point in time, you've paid a deposit, you've committed to go to that school. So if you're going to do an appeal, I always recommend at least before mid-April. But talk to the financial aid office because they may have a priority deadline that's before that or after that, and you want to be aware of that information. Now, on Going Merry, we have a tool called the Financial Aid Appeal Letter Generator. This is built off of our template that's also accessible to you, but it helps you actually draft the letter yourself. So if you've never done one, you don't know where to start, this is a really great resource for you. You input some information and it helps you automatically write the letter. I have a video here that's just 1 or 2 minutes. I think it's really helpful for just seeing the different components really fast and the things that you'll want to consider in real time. So I'll go ahead and play that.
Hello and welcome. This is a quick video guide to the Financial Aid Appeal Generator and how it can help you write an appeal in 4 steps. To get started, you'll want to go to goingmerry.com or download the Going Merry app. Note that this tool is only available to high school seniors and parents. From there, go to the Appeals Generator and click on Start Now. Step 1 is to enter your basic info. You'll answer a few questions about yourself and your college. If you already have a Going Merry profile, your basic info should be filled out automatically. You should see an appeal letter introduction pop up on the right-hand side. For step 2, you'll answer questions about your school and why it's your top choice. You can find some example answers here if you're not sure what to say. We recommend providing a couple specific reasons. For step 3, you'll fill out the reasons for your appeal. You can choose from 6 options. Choose option 1 if you got a better financial aid package from a similar college. If you're not sure what that means or are having trouble deciphering your aid package, you can view these resources at the top to learn more. You can add up to 3 colleges here. If you were accepted to a better ranked college, select option 2. You'll need to upload your admission letter here. If your family income this year is lower than expected, choose this option. Here, we provide a couple of common reasons you can choose from for why your family income went down this year, or you can provide your own reason. If your family had more expenses than they reported, choose option 4. Option 5 will apply to most students who either made a mistake on their FAFSA or there was something wrong with the form. This last option is here if you don't see your reason on this list. Here you can give more information about why you are appealing. Once you have provided all your reasons, you can preview your letter and make any changes and edits. When you're happy with it, you can generate the PDF and you're done. From there, you can send the letter to each college.
So I hope that helps illustrate the different components of a letter and also how really short and succinct that letter is. We do have this tool available to you, but you can also access that template if it would be easier for you to draft it that way as well. But I would really recommend that even if you don't use our template, you go and find a template before filing an appeal. We just find that students have a better success when they're not doing it free form, and they instead follow a format that other people have seen success with. But that is something you can absolutely do. I would really recommend it, especially if your financial circumstances have changed. You've got multiple kids in college, you get a better offer. The one big red flag I would give to you just to pay attention to is pay attention to your tone. Some people will approach a financial aid appeal as a negotiation, and that can actually damage it can hinder their ability to get a successful appeal. This isn't a negotiation. It is a appeal. It is an ask for this college to reconsider their standard process and to look and see if there's some additional circumstances they should take into account for you as an individual. And so just approach it with the right tone, be really considerate, be really patient. It is something that can really impact your ability to be successful if you go into it with the wrong mindset as well. So just want to flag that for you. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is student loans. And again, I really want to stress student loans are the last course of action. You really want to follow those 6 steps to maximizing your aid, and student loans are that last step. I do also want to just say there's no shame in needing student loans. College is expensive. A lot of kids take out loans to continue on with their education. It's just about being smart about it, understanding what you're getting into, and also following the best practices, which are filing the FAFSA, considering federal financial aid and federal student loan options first, only borrowing what you need, trying to pay down the balance while you're still in school, continuing to look for gift aid opportunities like scholarships and grants to reduce the reliance on student loans, those types of things. Now, when it comes to student loans, there's 4 types. Federal direct subsidized and unsubsidized student loans are very similar, so I'm going to group them together. The main difference between federal direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans are that subsidized student loans are not going to accumulate any interest while the student is in school. Also, students can only receive subsidized student loans if they demonstrate financial need at that school. So, one school you might have financial need, another school you might not. So, depending on the circumstances, you may get them or you may not. Other than that, direct subsidized and unsubsidized are very similar. There's no guarantor needed. There's no credit check. There's no origination. There, you can receive them as an independent student. And also, they are only in the name of the student. So parents don't have to co-sign on these. Also, they generally have the lower interest rates because they're set by the federal government and not by the private market. They're also fixed interest rates that can be easier to repay rather than a variable interest rate, which you might see with private student loan providers. Also, loan payments for federal direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans don't have to occur until you graduate, leave school, or drop below half time. That said, best practice is to pay down the loan while you're in school. That way you don't have to accumulate too much interest. Um, Also, with these loans, there are annual caps. The loan amounts vary by year. You typically see freshmen receive less federal direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans than someone who is a senior, than someone who is in a graduate program. And you are only eligible for these opportunities if you do file the FAFSA. With Parent Plus loans, these are going to be offered to parents. They are in the name of the parent and the parent only. They are offered by the federal government, but they're going to be more like a traditional student loan. They're going to have an origination, a credit check. They're going to go through that whole process, and repayment is expected to begin when the funds are dispersed. That said, you do have the option to defer, and because these are federal student loan providers, they can be more flexible, and they can also be more flexible with repayment terms. Most common term is 10 to 15 years and on an income-driven repayment plan. Now, the caveats here. Federal Parent Plus loans are not interest rates set by the federal government, so they're set by the private market. This means they do not always have the best interest rate, and this can especially be true if you have a strong credit score. So be aware of that. If you do feel like you've got a strong credit score, it sometimes is beneficial just to double check with the private student loan providers just to make sure you are getting a good rate. It can be quite a big difference, unfortunately. The other thing is that with Parent Plus loans, these are in the name of the parent, and there is no way to change that. You take them out in your name as a parent, you pay them in full in your name as a parent. The only way to get them out of your name is going to be to refinance them to a private student loan provider upon graduation, which is quite difficult for many students. This is because students typically, upon graduation, have limited credit history, limited income history, limited employment history, which are things that private student loan providers are going to consider. So just be aware of that. A lot of parents don't know that, and then they go after graduation, like, okay, my student's taking over the loan, and they can't. And so they've got 10 or 15 years with this loan that they weren't anticipating. So I just really recommend you be fully aware of that before going in and taking out a Parent Plus loan. With private student loans, do your research. There is so much variability between private student loan providers in customer service and their rates and their terms and their policies, their options that they have for you. They vary greatly. And so it's really important to think about things like looking at Trustpilot reviews, seeing how they treat their customers. I always say go ahead and call in and see if you can get someone on the phone because if you're going to need customer service, it's good to know that you can. If a mobile app is important to you, consider that. Look and see if they have one. If it's got bad ratings, might be something you want to think about. Ask them if they have rate discounts for paying while the student is in school or the option to even defer the loan. Not all private student loan providers offer that. And the big thing is do your research. I recommend doing 3 to 5 rate checks with different private student loan providers if you do end up looking at them, just to make sure you are getting the best rate. And also be aware that generally you're going to have to be a parent co-signer with the student as a primary on that loan. There are options to do parent-only private student loans as well, but generally that's what we're going to see because it helps the student build some credit history. But if you take away nothing else, do your research. Now, if you do end up in student loans, the biggest question before you go and do that is to ask yourself what you're comfortable with. Have a conversation with your student. I always recommend that conversation happening now before you even get all those offer letters in. If you're not willing to co-sign a loan, they need to be aware of that. They need to be realistic when they're looking at their financial aid offers. If you have a specific budget monthly that you're able to give them for college, they need to be aware of that. Be aware of your ability to co-sign a loan. Would you be someone who's eligible? Do you have a strong credit score? Do you have a strong credit history? Are you financially able to cover those expenses from that loan if the student were no longer able to pay it? Go into that eyes wide open and also ask yourself, do the pros outweigh the cons? Because for some students it does, and for some students it doesn't. And the damage that it can do to your relationship between the parent and the student could be pretty great. So I always just recommend take a step back, double check that you're doing it for the right reason, double check that your student is reliable if you believe that they will be able to get through college, if that loan will be something they will be responsible for, and just be prepared that this is something that's a long-term commitment that can take 10 or 15 years to repay, and you may be on the loan for that entirety of that time. Okay. This is where I'm going to take a pause. I like to always leave a question and answer session just in case. Before I do that, I do just want to say there is some kind of FAQs that I've been getting lately about FAFSA, federal financial aid, and stuff like that. The big thing I'll say here is there's um, a lot of guessing that's happening, and so I always like to stress what we know. We know that the FAFSA opens the vast majority of opportunities. It is the thing that makes students eligible for the most opportunities out there, and so it's still going to be the most important thing to do. If you're in a situation where you're a DACA student and it makes you nervous because of the current administration or something like that, I hear you, I understand, fully empathize with you. And what I would just stress is that we know that right now, the FAFSA can only be used for determining financial aid information. It cannot be transmitted to any other department or anything like that. So, if you're nervous about it, I would reach out to a financial aid officer at your school. There's a lot of speculation and wildness online, making claims that aren't true. Don't go to social media to get that advice. And especially with the news right now, especially talking about the Department of Education, the best resource you have out there is to be your counselor, Miss Asbury, going to the financial aid office at a school you're interested in, reaching out to Going Mary, where we're going to give you really factual advice because online there's a lot of discourse and a lot of misinformation. So just be really careful about where you're going to get that information as well. Okay. I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions? And feel free to come off mute to ask out loud or drop it in the chat. I'll try and pull up a chat bubble really quick so I can check it out. Does anyone have anything I didn't talk about or I need to talk a little bit more about?
Where did you say the website is we should go to look at local scholarships that maybe if like they live in Tarrant County might be available?
So you can Google scholarships for students who are in Tarrant County. That sometimes that can be helpful, or like scholarship foundations in Tarrant County that can be helpful. But I know Fort Worth ISD, if you search FWISD scholarships, they have a scholarship listings that they update monthly, and they have it
Mhm.
broken down by class year, and they have a long list of quite a few scholarships
Okay.
there. We also have some on Going Mary. I know that we have some Tarrant County specific scholarships right now because we work with scholarship providers and stuff directly to make their scholarships more accessible too. So that's where I would go look.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
And note that those are sent out by me to the students every month. So they have
Mhm.
them going to their emails, but then the website is updated where anybody can look at it.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, well, if not, I'm gonna just say thank you so much. I'm gonna hand it back over to Miss Asbury so she can wrap things up. But thank y'all for so much for your time tonight. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or anyone on the Going Mary team. We're always here to help answer questions. Thanks.